Hello guys, welcome back to TFD. So we're here again, and this time it's a pretty interesting moment because this could actually be Caitlyn Clark's final game for United States women's national basketball team in this stretch of games. And honestly, when you think about it, there's a little bit of uncertainty around the future here. I've said this a few times already, but there is absolutely no guarantee that Caitlyn Clark will even play in the next FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup. And the reason for that has nothing to do with talent or performance. It really comes down to timing and circumstances with the Women's National Basketball Association season and her team's situation with the Indiana Fever. If we reach that World Cup period and the Indiana Fever are sitting in a tough spot in the standings, things could get complicated very quickly. Imagine if the Fever are the 6th or 7th seed, only 1 or 2 games away from the playoffs. Or maybe they're just barely outside the playoff picture, sitting in the 9th spot and fighting for their lives to get in. In those situations, the team might want her staying focused on the WNBA season rather than playing international basketball. And yeah, from a team perspective, that makes sense. But from a fan perspective, you're kind of sitting there like, damn, that would suck. And who knows, there's also the opposite scenario. Maybe the Fever are actually having a great year and they're competing for the top seed. That's another situation where a team might want their star player staying healthy and locked in for a deep playoff push. Then there's the worst case scenario too. Injuries hitting the roster and the team needing Clark even more. So when you look at all those possibilities, it's actually very realistic that this might be the last time we see Caitlyn Clark wearing a Team USA jersey for a couple of years. That's kind of wild to think about when you really stop and process it. Like, seriously, that's crazy when you think about it for a second. Now, with that said, this game itself is still a big one. I've seen a lot of people online reacting to Spain women's national basketball team losing to Italy women's national basketball team and immediately jumping to the conclusion that Spain must be terrible. And honestly, that's just not the case. That game needs a little bit of context. Spain had already qualified for the World Cup before they even played Italy. They were basically experimenting and rotating players heavily. They were doing something that looked almost like hockey substitutions. 5 players in, 5 players out. Constantly changing lineups. And honestly, when teams do that, the game can look messy as hell. When you do that, there's no rhythm. Nobody gets comfortable. The team never really settles into the game. It's chaotic basketball. So Italy, on the other hand, were doing the complete opposite. They were running their best players into the ground because they had to win in order to qualify. For them, it was basically an elimination game, so they treated it like their season was on the line. And when one team is experimenting and the other team is playing like their lives depend on it, yeah, the result can look weird. If Team USA had approached their game against Italy the same way Spain did, subbing entire lineups every few minutes and constantly breaking rhythm, there's no chance they win that game by 30-plus points. In fact, there were already a few lineups in that Italy game where the USA actually lost those minutes. Italy stayed competitive for long stretches. But when the USA locked in and played their best players together, the difference in talent was obvious. Like, painfully obvious. And that's really the key point here. If the United States plays the way they did against Italy with their serious lineups and real intensity, nobody in this tournament can touch them. It's that simple. The only way the USA loses a game is if they don't take an opponent seriously. Now, when it comes to Spain specifically, the matchup is interesting, especially for Clark. Spain really doesn't have a great defensive answer for her. They don't have a strong pick-and-roll defender who can consistently slow her down. If Clark is allowed to run those actions freely, she could have a huge game. And honestly, when Clark gets comfortable running pick-and-rolls, good luck stopping that shit. There's a good chance she'll be matched up against Iana Martin for large parts of the game, and Clark will almost certainly try to attack that matchup. Spain's big defender, Awa Pham, is actually pretty solid at hedging screens, but she's also only 19 years old. If Clark turns the corner and gets downhill, that's a really tough assignment for a young player. And then there are the lineups where Megan Gustafson is on the floor. That's when things could get really interesting, because those pick-and-roll situations will feel like a bit of an Iowa reunion. Clark knows exactly how to manipulate those situations, and it could turn into some pretty entertaining basketball. On the other side of the ball, Spain isn't a super physical team. They rely more on skill, passing, and finesse. If the USA continues to trap every single screen aggressively, Spain actually has the offense that can punish that. All it takes is a quick release pass from the trapped guard, then a dump pass into the post, and suddenly there's a wide-open layup. That's been one of the issues with this defensive scheme. Sometimes the traps are aggressive, but the rotations behind them aren't quick enough, and when that happens, the defense can look sloppy as hell. And that's where communication becomes critical. One of the strange things with this Team USA group is how often you see little defensive miscommunications. Players rotate late, or someone helps when another player expected them to stay home. Sometimes that even leads to unfair criticism. For example, there are moments where one player rotates correctly to help on defense, the ball gets swung to the corner, and someone hits an open three. People blame the helper, but in reality, that's just the shot the defense is designed to allow, and fans still lose their damn minds online. Still, those breakdowns can add up. Because of that, I actually expect Spain to make this game a lot closer than people think. I don't see this being one of those games where Team USA jumps out to a massive first-quarter lead and never looks back. Spain is smart, disciplined, and capable of exploiting mistakes. They're not some pushover team that's just going to roll over and get destroyed. So, while the USA should still be the favorite, this might end up being a much tighter and more competitive game than many fans are expecting. And if it really is Caitlyn Clark's last appearance with Team USA for a while, it would be pretty fitting if it turned into a memorable battle. Honestly, that would make the whole thing even more fun to watch. Like, if you look at this team, you're looking at how many players that I would consider to be AA players who have played in the WNBA or are WNBA level players on this team. Buenavida? Yes. Mariana Ortiz? Yes. Cazorla? Yes. Again, young backup. Really good backup. Maite Cazorla has played in the WNBA. Aina Ayuso? Backup. Maria Araujo? Decent backup. Helena Puello? Maybe. Maria Conde might start for the Valkyries. Awa Pham, starter on a low team, backup on a good team. She's 19. Raquel Carrera would be very solid for the New York Liberty this year. Megan Gustafsson is a solid enough backup in the WNBA. Iana Martin could be a lottery pick. Ginzo, again, end-of-the-bench type of player. One of the biggest things about Spain that people keep overlooking is how well they actually play together as a group. When you look at the roster, it's honestly a really young team overall. Sure, there are a couple of players who are a bit older, but even their veterans are still mostly in their 20s. Take Megan Gustafsson, for example. She's 29 years old. That's considered one of the older players on the team, which tells you a lot about the makeup of this roster. Then you look at Raquel Carrera. She's only 24. That's basically the same age range as Paige Beckers, and somehow she's already seen as one of the experienced players on the Spanish squad. She's no longer the young prospect coming up. Now she's stepping into that veteran role. Maria Conde, another important piece, is 29 as well. Again, that's where their leadership is coming from. Players who are still technically in their prime years. Even someone like Carol Casas, who feels like she's been around forever, is still only around that same age range. When you step back and look at it, this is genuinely a very young national team. And the craziest part is that none of the players from Spain's squad that made deep runs in tournaments like Eurobasket or the World Cup 8 years ago are still around. That entire generation is gone. This is basically the new era of Spanish basketball. Now, the one player who really stands out in terms of experience is Mariana Ortiz. She's the oldest player on the roster, and honestly, she's really good. Don't let the box score numbers fool you. She's one of those players who might not always put up huge stats, but she affects the game everywhere. She can run the offense, make smart decisions, defend, and just keep things steady. You'll look up and she'll have something like 5 points, 5 assists, solid defense, and barely any mistakes. Players like that are incredibly valuable, especially in international basketball. Now, yes, Spain did have a rough ending at Eurobasket last year. they had that final within reach and kind of let it slip away at the end. A lot of people call it a choke, and maybe that's fair. But the reality is they were good enough to beat France in that tournament, and for most of that run, they looked like the best team out there. But honestly, none of that pressure really matters in this particular game. There's nothing to choke here. Both teams are basically going to qualify regardless, so in many ways this feels more like a high-level exhibition than an elimination game. That being said, I actually think Spain might come into this game wanting it a little more. They'll want to prove themselves against the United States. And even though Team USA is clearly the better team talent-wise, Spain is a much tougher test than some of the other opponents we've seen. Beating Italy by 35 points was incredibly impressive for the United States. That was easily their best performance in this stretch of games. And honestly, that result matters way more than the other blowouts we saw. Beating New Zealand by 50, Puerto Rico by 40, or Senegal by 60 plus doesn't really tell you much. Those games were expected. But beating Italy like that actually means something. If Team USA plays at that same level again and somehow beats Spain by 30 or 40 points, that would send a pretty scary message to the rest of the world. Because right now, this roster doesn't even have all of its top forwards. In some spots, you could argue it's closer to a B team or even deeper in the rotation. And that's what makes the future so interesting. Imagine a full-strength Team USA roster with players like Caitlyn Clark and Paige Beckers running the backcourt together. Even if they don't start away, maybe veterans like Chelsea Gray still get those roles, the combination of Clark and Beckers on the floor at the same time would be almost impossible to guard. Seriously, that kind of offensive creativity and shooting would be a nightmare for defenses. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how this game plays out. At one point, I was even thinking it might even decide an MVP for the tournament, but honestly, I don't even know if there's an official MVP for a World Cup qualifying group stage. Either way, it should be a really fun matchup. Let me know what you guys think. And don't forget to like and subscribe.